I used to think ghosts were just stories. But the first time I stepped onto the stage at Ford's Theater, I felt something shift. Not just in the air, in time. My name's Eli. I'm 25, run sound for a small DC theater company. Most nights I'm tweaking mics or replacing busted cables. But that night, April 14th, I stayed late, alone, helping a historian set up an old Lincoln-era exhibit. There was this one chair, velvet red, gold trim. "The very seat Lincoln sat in," she said. Curious, I sat, just for a second, and then SFX. Sudden glitch, heartbeat thud, lights snap out. The lights died. The walls shifted. I was no longer alone. I stumbled to my feet, but the seats were gone. The electric panels, gone. Instead, flickering gas lights, wooden balconies, a faint scent of coal and perfume. My phone buzzed in my pocket, then exploded in sparks. Out the window, a newspaper boy screamed, "President Lincoln to attend our American cousin tonight at Ford's Theater." The date? April 14th, 1865. The night history dies. If you could warn a dead man, but no one believed you existed, what would you do? The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind, the kind that hums just before thunder hits. People walked past me in bonnets and stovepipe hats, their faces drawn, their boots clicking on cobblestone. No cars, no noise. Just the breath of a city trying to hold itself together. I wandered down Pennsylvania Avenue like a ghost in reverse, a man from the future who didn't belong anywhere. My hoodie drew stares. A little girl clutched her mother tighter as I passed. And when I caught my reflection in a store window, I didn't recognize the man staring back. My phone was dead. My ID, meaningless. But in my pocket, I found a paper I hadn't put there. A draft notice, issued to Elijah Bennett, Private 11th Infantry. The address led me to a boarding house, where apparently I had a room. A life. Waiting. Someone, or something, had written me into this world. Inside the room, a tattered uniform lay across the bed, still warm. My handwriting on a folded note. "Don't run. You have 12 hours. I read it again and again. 12 hours. That's all I had until Booth would slip into the presidential box and fire a bullet into the back of Lincoln's skull. At dusk, I walked the streets again, trying to find a pattern. Any sign this wasn't madness. That's when I saw him. John Wilkes Booth. He moved like someone who owned every room before he entered it. Crisp suit, confident stride. He laughed loudly outside a tavern, quoting Shakespeare to a pair of giggling women. I froze. This was him. The man the world would damn for a century. And he was charming. A man passed me and muttered, "Don't trust that actor." Devil behind a smile. I nodded slowly. Back at the boarding house, I tore through newspapers, maps, anything I could find. I needed to know exactly when, where, and how it would happen. But as I traced his path, a chilling realization hit me. Even if I warned someone, why would they listen? I was a nameless soldier with no proof, no identity, no rank, no voice, just a ticking clock, and one impossible choice. If the past refused to hear you, would you scream louder or stay silent and bleed with it? There's something wrong with the way Booth smiles. It's too perfect. Like he rehearsed it in the mirror 100 times, but forgot to make it human. I found him again that morning, standing outside Ford's Theater, arms folded, watching workers paint over a crack in the wood paneling. He looked up at the sky like he owned it. I had no plan, no script, just rage. "Excuse me," I said, too loud. My voice cracked. He turned, and for a second, we just stared at each other. "You look lost," he said, voice smooth, eyes sharp. "Soldier?" "Just returned," I lied. "From Virginia." He extended a hand. "John, actor by trade, patriot by soul." We shook hands. His grip was firm, too firm, like he wanted to own me for a moment. He asked about the war, my thoughts on Lincoln. "A tyrant," he said casually, brushing imaginary lint from his coat, "turning our republic into a monarchy." I stayed silent. He studied me then, really studied me, like he could smell the century I didn't belong to. "You have strange eyes," he said, tilting his head. "Seen too much, or not enough." I tried to walk away, but he followed. "Do you believe in fate?" he asked, his voice now low, coaxing. "That some men are born with a purpose so heavy it splits them in two?" I turned. "Do you believe murder redeems anything?" He grinned. "You think I'm talking about murder?" That was when I saw it, just for a flash, beneath the charm, the fanatic. He didn't think he was committing a crime. He thought he was fulfilling scripture. Later, back in my room, I couldn't stop shaking. Not from fear, but from the certainty that I had no idea how to stop this man. He wasn't just planning a killing. He was performing it, a role, a finale. And I had no stage, no audience, no script to stop him. I scribbled plans, timelines, routes Lincoln might take. I considered writing anonymous letters, barging into police stations, screaming it from rooftops. But all I had was a fake identity and a truth no one would believe. And still, I kept thinking about that smile, that damn rehearsed smile, as if he knew he'd go down in history, not as a villain, but as a martyr in his own mind. If the villain believes he's the hero, how do you stop him without becoming the villain yourself? It was tucked beneath the floorboard, yellowed, fragile. My name written on the envelope in a rushed, uneven scrawl. I stared at it for a long time, too afraid to touch something that, by all logic, shouldn't exist. But I opened it anyway. Inside, a single page, written in my handwriting. "You've been here before. You failed. You don't remember yet, but you will. This is your last chance. Don't stop Booth. Not yet." My blood ran cold. I read it again, lips moving, heart pounding. Who the hell wrote this? Me? How could I have been here before? Why didn't I remember? Time travel isn't supposed to loop, is it? There was no sci-fi manual for this. Suddenly, everything shifted from mission to maze. The next morning, I walked with purpose. I needed answers. I needed truth. And there was only one person in this God-forsaken year who seemed to know how to play both sides of the curtain. Booth. I found him near the theater, rehearsing lines from Julius Caesar. "Death is a great debt paid only once," he whispered to himself. I waited until he noticed me. "Back again?" He smirked. "You're either stalking me or seeking confession." I held his gaze. "Let's say I'm looking for something older than confession." He looked intrigued. "Philosopher, soldier, spy. Which are you today?" "Someone who knows you're about to do something history won't forgive." His eyes darkened. "History is written by survivors, but legacies, those are etched by martyrs. And what are you? A necessary wound." Later, back in my room, I unfolded the letter again. The ink had begun to fade, as if time itself didn't want it to stay. And on the back, a second line had appeared. Faint, as if drawn from invisible ink. "Save him too soon, and thousands more will die." I stumbled back. What did that mean? What if stopping the assassination triggered something worse? Another war? A fractured nation? Would Lincoln have led with mercy or with iron? Was I here to save a man or to preserve a death? That night, I stood outside Ford's Theater, watching the lamplighters move like ghosts. And for the first time, I felt it. Not fear, not panic, doubt. If saving a life means rewriting the grief that built your future, do you still save it? The crowd was already gathering outside Ford's Theater when I arrived. Women in lace gloves, men with pocket watches and polished boots. Lanterns swinging, voices rising like a tide of nervous anticipation. It felt like the world was holding its breath. And in that breath, time began to tremble. I stood across the street in the shadows, staring at that infamous box seat, draped with American flags, lit with soft gaslight. Tonight, the President of the United States would take that seat, completely unaware he was walking into history's gun barrel, unless I stopped it, unless I chose to let it happen. Inside, the play had begun. Our American cousin. Laughter rolled through the theater like wind through trees. I moved quickly, blending into the crowd, dressed in borrowed clothes from my soldier's uniform, cap pulled low. I found a spot near the back. From here I could see Lincoln's silhouette. Tall, composed, gentle even in stillness. His wife beside him, a soldier behind, so calm, so unaware. And then I saw him, Booth, in the wings, moving like a man with nothing left to lose, one hand beneath his coat, the other steadying himself against the velvet curtain. He caught my eye, just for a second, and he smiled. He moved toward the stairs, climbing slowly toward the box, as if he could hear the ticking of history pushing him forward. My hands clenched. I could have shouted. I could have run. But something inside me froze. The letter. The warning. Don't stop Booth. Not yet. What if stopping him unleashed a worse version of the world? What if Lincoln survived? But the unity he fought for died anyway. But then... Booth drew the gun. I couldn't breathe. 10 seconds. 10 seconds before history burned again. I moved, weaving through the aisles. My heartbeat thundered louder than the stage actors' voices. I reached the stairs. Too far. Too late. He raised the pistol. Sic semper tyrannis. Thus always to tyrants. The shot never came. I tackled him from behind. The crowd gasped. The play stopped. Screams shattered the air. Booth hit the floor hard. The pistol skidded across the wood. He roared, wild, scrambling. Guards rushed in. Confusion reigned. I turned toward Lincoln, alive, stunned. He stared at me, not with gratitude, but with something else. Recognition. Like he'd seen me before. They arrested Booth, dragged him snarling into the dark. Blood on his face, my own ribs aching from the impact. And me? I disappeared into the crowd. No one stopped me. No one knew who I was. But something felt wrong. Not triumph, not relief. Something deeper. Like I had ripped a thread, and time had no idea how to sew it back. What happens when you stop a tragedy? But history still wants something to bleed? They said the president had survived an assassination attempt. A failed madman, the papers called Booth. A patriot derailed, his allies muttered in secret. But I knew better. He wasn't the only one derailed. Because the moment Lincoln lived, everything began to die differently. The first signs were quiet. Rumors of Southern resistance reforming. Soldiers refusing to disband. A whisper about a man named Edmund Ruffin, a firebrand who should have ended his life after the war, now preaching a second uprising. Then came the letters. A Confederate general, still bitter, still armed, refused to honor the surrender at Appomattox. He seized control of 3 counties in Mississippi. By July, skirmishes turned to battles. By August, it was a second war. And Lincoln? He looked tired. Not physically, soul tired. The kind of weariness that clung to his skin like dust. I watched from the shadows, month after month, afraid to face what I had caused. The president spoke often of healing, of mercy. But in a world where the first bullet missed, hearts hardened in different ways. Reconstruction stalled. Black voices, once promised a new dawn, now watched that promise rot in the sun. Militias formed. Lynchings returned. The emancipation that once echoed like thunder began to flicker like a dying candle. And the strangest part, people forgot. Not that Lincoln had lived, but that he was ever meant to die. History rewrote itself like it had always been this way. Books changed, timelines warped. Booth became a footnote, a name without weight, a ghost without a grave, except me. I remembered everything. One night, I returned to the boarding house. A different note waited beneath the floorboard. New paper, same handwriting. The timeline is breaking. You have until November 1865. Fix it. No signature, no instructions. Just fix it. But I knew what it meant. Lincoln had to die. Not because he deserved it, not because Booth was right, but because history needed his death to unify a nation in grief. A martyr brings people together. A survivor gives them someone to blame. And I had denied the world that moment. I stood outside the White House gates one final time. The man I had saved was inside, alive, weary, fighting a war that should have ended months ago. And I realized this wasn't about heroism anymore. It was about balance. If a single life could anchor 1,000 others, would you let it go to save the whole sea? History is built on images, moments frozen in silver, proof that we were here, that we mattered. But what happens when a photograph remembers you and no one else does? I found it in an antique shop in New York City, 1865. The shopkeeper was half asleep, flipping through a new shipment of war memorabilia. I wandered in, hands shaking, mind unraveling, and there it was, a black and white photograph, blurry, smudged, but unmistakable. President Lincoln standing on the south lawn, sunlight on his face, a boy holding his hat, a general saluting, and just behind them, half in shadow, me. Not the uniformed me from this timeline, but me from the beginning. Modern haircut, hoodie, confused eyes staring straight at the camera. I dropped the photo. The shopkeeper looked up. "Something wrong, soldier?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, because the world was bending, folding in on itself. I wasn't just in the past anymore. I was becoming a wrinkle in time. I ran. Out the door. Down cobblestone streets. Through the city that didn't recognize me anymore. Memories started glitching, fractured images flashing behind my eyes. I was in the theater. I was in the battlefield. I was holding Booth's gun. I was dying. I was alive. I was everywhere and nowhere at once. Time had snapped, and I was its loose thread. Back at the boarding house, I found a new envelope. No letter this time, just a photograph. Same picture, same shadows, same me, and one line scrawled on the back. "If you stay, the future forgets itself." I stared into the mirror. My reflection flickered, glitching between centuries. My hands weren't mine anymore. My voice cracked like an old vinyl skipping through timelines. I wasn't just a traveler now. I was becoming a paradox. And in my bones, I understood the truth. Time doesn't care about saving heroes. It only cares about balance. Lincoln's survival had broken something sacred, and now the timeline was bleeding. If history starts remembering you, but no one else does, are you still real? The theater was empty this time. No crowd, no laughter, just silence, like the whole world was holding its breath before a scream. It was November 1865, a night that shouldn't exist. History had bent, then cracked, and now it was begging for release. I sat alone in the presidential box, his box, staring down at the stage where Booth was never meant to act again. But I wasn't here to watch. I was here to end it. I had spent weeks wrestling with the choice. Could I kill a man to save a moment? Number, but could I let him die? Yes. Because the world I'd stumbled into after saving Lincoln was worse than the one where he died. Worse because it forgot how to grieve together. Worse because the wound stayed open. His survival had fractured something deeper than politics. It had shattered myself. That night, I left a letter with the theater manager, anonymous, detailing the exact time and method of an imminent threat. Enough to ensure security looked away at just the right moment. Not because I wanted Booth to win, but because I needed time to heal. I slipped backstage as the performance began. I watched from the wings. I saw Lincoln arrive, weary but smiling. He didn't see me, but I saw him. He took his seat, and then, like clockwork, Booth appeared in the corridor, eyes burning like a prophet's, hand on the pistol he wasn't meant to hold anymore. He didn't see me either, and I did nothing, not out of cowardice, but out of mercy, for the timeline, for the future, for him. Bang! The shot rang out like thunder swallowed by history. Lincoln collapsed, screams erupted, the curtain fell. This time, the story stayed the same. I walked into the street, unnoticed, faded. My hands no longer flickered, my voice no longer cracked. The fracture was closing. History had chosen its scar. I returned to the boarding house one last time. The mirror no longer pulsed with static. My face was my own. My clothes felt real. I was no longer a paradox. I was a man who had done the unthinkable. Let justice die so truth could live. I lay on the bed, closed my eyes, and when I opened them, I was home. But something was different. The theater brochure on my nightstand now had a bloodstain. The photo on my desk, me, still in the background, forever blurred. No one remembered what I did. No one knew I was ever gone, except me and time. Could you carry a death in your chest if it meant the world never had to?